be ever so helpful so we can keep making this for you year after year. I also, Becca's Can Donuts and Coffee Shop is outside, so if you want to grab yourself a hot cup of specialty coffee and a donut, grab that. She's going to be here until 11 or until they sell out. After that, our concession stand will open up, which will be at the very back near the green room door. Everything is really reasonably priced. We're going to have soda and fresh popcorn and candy. And at 11 o'clock, just outside the doors here, Emerald City Foods is going to be opening up a pop-up cafe with sandwiches and stuff. So you don't actually have to leave the con this year if you don't want to for lunch. Grab yourself a po' boy, some sandwiches and some sides from her shop too. Also, make sure to check out the vendors. We have like 5 authors in this year, all with their books, and they're all signing today. Especially Jeff Provine, he has just released a brand new book. Go check out his table, get some books signed, visit all of the vendors, and a lot of the teams have tables today and are also selling, so go and check those out. Get some cards to take home. Let's see here. The raffles, oh my gosh, we have so many raffles this year. Everybody should have gotten 1 ticket when they came in for free. You can throw to a raffle. If you go over to the head table here, we can get the head table lady to wave her hand. There we go. They are selling tickets over there. They're 1 for 1 or 6 for 5. Throw them into anything you want to try over there. We will announce winners at 7:30. You do have to be present to win. So at least make sure you're back by then so you can get your prizes picked up. I also want to say thank you to Bargain Center out of Independence. They sponsored us this year and gave us the past jumbo TV to use. And that's what all the presentations are going to be on this year too, so it's going to be fantastic to see. If you were here last year, we had a little trouble with our projector and being able to see it, but now, going on. We're also having prizes from Bargain Center throughout the day, so stick around for a chance to win those. And we also want to thank 2 guys in a PA for running all the sound for us. Actually, today it's 1 guy in a PA. The other guy stinks. So if you are interested in them, they do weddings and parties and proms and backup for festivals and things like that. So get in touch with him if you are interested in using their services. So we're going to go ahead and get our day started. The first thing we're going to do is the ghost panel. This year we're doing the science of ghosts. What are they and where did they come from? Now this year we're doing something a little bit different. This year we are doing guest moderators. And this year, Adrian Scalf of Fort Smith, Arkansas is going to be our head moderator. There he is waving his hand. Adrian is the founding member and field investigator for River Valley Paranormal Research and Investigation out of Fort Smith, Arkansas. So he's got some, I'm sure, interesting questions for our panel today. All right, so I'm going to call our panel up. I need Jason Roberts, Roth Christopherson, Jake Frisbee, and Andy Rowe from Road Trip Paranormal out of Kansas. I need Jeff Provine, author for Clovis out of Oklahoma. Jason Alexander, the Ghost Dad out of Oklahoma. Tina Scalf, River Valley Paranormal, Arkansas. Ashley Evans, Penn Paranormal, Kansas. Leah Rivers and Mike Rivers out of L&M Paranormal, Kansas. Robert Prevo, author, Monstrous, Arkansas. Clint Hancock, OPIS, Oklahoma. Lisa and Alex Martin, Dark Ozarks, Missouri. Christy Campbell, Psychic Medium, Oklahoma. And Doc, what we call him Doc? Doc McGumpy out of Tulsa's Ghost. And I hope that, so this will be our largest panel today. You can see it's like the most popular. Before I get off here, I want to remind everybody, this is an open ParaCon. You are welcome to ask questions and chit chat and join in on the conversation. If you have a question, raise your hand and the moderator will get to you. All right? So let's have a fantastic day and let's start this panel.
Do I need to use mic? I like this. Either way. Here's the mic. Hey? Sketchy. That's all right. We're good. Sketchy mic. Sketchy. Okay. No problem. Hi. You need to do better than that. Come on, guys. I know it's 9:30 on a Saturday and you're thinking I should still be in bed. I agree. Because I don't like to roll over until like 10 o'clock and it's before then. Anyhow, this panel wants to answer your question. So if you have a question, like she said, raise your hand. I'll come out to you with the mic and you can talk into the mic too. And you can ask your question. But I want to start off with the first question here. This panel is called The Science of Ghosts. What are they and where do they come from? So answer that. What are ghosts?
Everybody at once. Everybody at once.
That'd be great. Everybody at once. Freaking me out.
Somebody.
Dead people.
They're dead people. Okay. ParaCon over. Wow.
It depends on your view. A lot of people think they're interdimensional, different phases of energy that can cross into our energy field, and you can see them sometimes or hear them. That's my feeling on it for the most part, is going through different energy fields from one side to the other, as they say.
Another view is that we're dealing with the function of time and space. Quantum physics is actually coming out with a lot of theories that support this idea that basically we're bumping up against another point in time, and that they're probably aware of us, or at least part of the time as well. I find that fascinating because it literally combines science and the physical world with the idea of ghosts.
I'll go with her, dead people, but here's the theory. So me and a buddy were talking one time, same conversation. I was like, our consciousness is something that I believe would live on forever. So no matter what you believe religion, anything, consciousness, something can live on forever. So I got to thinking, we were at a house, we heard one of our names called over the recorder. We go to another investigation months down the road, it sounded like the same voice coming through the recorder. And it said our name again. And got to thinking, what if all that consciousness was kind of like the Force in Star Wars? And it's all there, no matter where you go, it's the same billions and billions of consciousness there together, but certain ones do reach out to you. So I kind of feel like, yeah, it's dead people, but it's your consciousness, what makes you who you are, just joining everybody else right above us. So.
Okay, that's weird. All right. So, go ahead.
I was just going to throw my 2 cents. So I believe that ghosts or spirits are just us as we leave this world. We've come back to visit family or loved ones or favorite church places. Our pets come to visit. And so from my line of work, which is a bit different, my belief is that ghosts or spirits are just us checking in with those that we love, or a fun place. We're nosy in life, so why not be nosy on the other side? And we like to visit different places. So that's my point of view.
Any questions from y'all? Not yet. All right. Here we get saying the science of ghosts. It has proven the existence of ghosts at all. I know you were talking about science here, so we bring up science all the time. Has science ever proven the ghost? Just no. Okay, that's a quick one. How about this then? Will it ever?
Yeah, it depends on your definition of science. I've seen pictures of ghosts, and pictures is science, and therefore it's proof of a ghost. Therefore, yes, science has proved ghosts already, but then people don't believe it. So in your definition of science, do you believe in every scientist has to believe in it, then probably not. But if you have a scientist that goes out and has an encounter with a ghost, and he believes in the ghost, and he saw it, therefore it's proven by a scientist, then yes, it's proved by science. So it just depends on your definition of science. Is science a scientist, or is it every scientist in the world collectively?
Did you want to go first?
I'm just building off of that, the definition of proof too, which there's a lot of evidence for stuff, but we often don't exactly know what's going on. For example, gravity, we thought we almost had it figured out with the Large Hadron Collider, finding, oh my gosh, what's the name of the new one? The Higgs boson, thank you. But we're still a long way from figuring out why and what. But I think most people believe in gravity, right? Okay, a couple of us don't, but most
I can't see it, so no.
don't know. Yeah, so we'll see, I guess. But that's the tricky thing about proving things. Yeah.
So,
Go ahead.
okay, so not to argue with you, but talking about the definition of science. I mean, science is just a process. It's how we learn about the world. Yes, there's pictures of ghosts, there's pictures and audio and firsthand accounts. I mean, as far back as that technology will go. But can we reliably, every single time, reproduce the conditions that people see ghosts in? No, we can't. I don't think it's really a matter of what the definition of science is. I think it's more so, can we take the scientific method and the processes in that and apply it to paranormal investigations? And so, I mean, no, it's we haven't proven it yet. We might prove it, but the nature of it, I mean, it's paranormal for a reason. So, take that as you will.
I think science too is looking for empirical evidence. So whether we're talking about the paranormal or we're talking about Bigfoot or whatever we're talking about, science typically wants empirical evidence that can be repeated, just like you were talking about in a lab. So that's really difficult whenever you're talking about something that's paranormally based, or we just simply don't understand the science behind it. Science does evolve. If you look at science today as opposed to science 200 years ago, you're, somewhere between alchemy and science at that point. We're constantly getting more and more evolved, not just as a species, but as far as our understanding of reality. 100 years from now, our understanding of reality may be completely different. Whereas ghosts and all that, we're just like, that's simple. We know how to explain that. But we may never understand how to explain it. It doesn't take away from the mystery and the interest that we have in all of those things. But we're always going to try, I know I'm a scientist. As a scientist, I'm always going to try and find that empirical evidence. I think we all are.
Wow, you sound smart.
It seems like one of the biggest fields that are going to more than likely be exploding into the exploration of ghosts is paranormal psychology, because we as a peoples are fascinated by life and death and what is in between those areas.
Going back to his question and answer, as in opinion, everyone's different. Everyone has a different opinion or variation of the person next to them. So you're going to have a wide variety of thoughts on any subject, whether it be ghost or anything else. And it's just being able to prove it. We have different instruments that we can detect energy fields and such in ghost hunting. But it doesn't always work the same in every instance. Sometimes we'll just get a picture, sometimes we'll get a voice on a ghost box or on a tape recorder, or you'll have a gauge meter or EMF detector that picks up the magnetic field fluctuation where you have no power in a building. So you get a baseline and you go back and you start asking questions, you start getting hits, and there's no power to that building or anywhere near that would set it off. So it's just a variation in people's different opinions of the subject.
Another thing to remember is that science, as we know it, is relatively new in the human experience. And it's never been the sole basis for people understanding something. An interesting point is spiritualism 200 years ago, which has now pretty much debunked and laughed at, even in the field, originally was based on scientific method. And basically, over time, it was debunked by other scientists who were uncomfortable with it. And then we went through a period where we didn't really have a scientific basis or even attempted basis in the field. And then we've kind of moved back to that. So it really is a process that changes over time. And it doesn't mean that if science hasn't proven something that someone doesn't believe in it or doesn't know their own experience. I personally think your own brain is the best tool you have and the best scientific tool you have in this.
Okay, so to follow up on that question, we talked about science and using science and proving with science. We say, a lot of people say they use scientific methods. So what do we mean by that? I've been hearing it for years.
If you get a result by a certain process, you try to repeat it, see if you get the same result or not. Is a standard scientific process of elimination, basically. What caused you to get a certain response or a certain result?
Well, does this work? Yeah. So it's a process. So basically, you come up with your hypothesis, what you're going to do. You write that out first. You write out how you're going to do your test. You write out how you're, controlled, how many people are there. You put all that down. What is wrong with that? Am I not talking close? Okay. So anyway, then you would do your controlled experiments, and you'd want to be able to replicate what you do every time. If you can replicate it, you write your conclusion, you submit it to your peers look at it, they try the same things you did to try to make that happen. Once they can make it happen or not make it happen, they rule on it at that point, and then it's accepted. If it's not accepted, they can't get it to recreate the same way you did, then yeah, debunked.
So you're saying if you can replicate it, then what kind of evidence are you calling that you can replicate whatever it is you're finding?
So let's say I had this cool spirit that anytime I went in this building would talk to me.
Every time you go in the building, the same spirit talks.
Every time, and I could make it do it 3, 4, 5 times. I had my microphones all over the room. You could tell where it's coming from. We have that evidence now. We take that, we write our conclusion, we put it to our peers. Our peers come to that same place, and they test it the same way we did. They get the same thing. They're going to accept it at that point. If they go in there and it won't talk to them, then it's just my opinion.
Maybe the spirit likes you and I'm thing.
You're the only one that's had one whistle at you.
So you're saying corroboration is the best thing for scientific method?
Well, yeah.
And another wrinkle in that is that, I'm sorry, did I cut you off? Another wrinkle is that if we are dealing with human spirits, whether they are lingering dead or whether it is a time-space issue, you're also dealing with free will. Most of the scientific method deals with processes that are repeatable because we don't influence them. Free will obviously influences. If you have an entity that says, I'm not talking today, does that mean it's not there? That's why the scientific method is hard to apply to these subjects. And someone mentioned parapsychology earlier. And unfortunately, in the 1960s and 70s, when they started seriously studying this at think tanks and universities, they decided to defund those programs. So it may also be a matter that until we put funding towards the subject at institutions who have the means to actually make controlled studies, you're not going to be able to do that.
I think one of the challenges that we face, just because of the nature of the field, is the process is difficult, because when we walk into a location one time, we might have a different energy than we walked in with the last time. So if I do an experiment in a lab, my energy doesn't matter. That experiment, it stands alone. But in the paranormal field, the energy I walk in with matters a lot. It matters who I'm with. It might have mattered who I came into contact with that week and what I'm carrying with me in that moment walking into a location. So it makes it really hard to duplicate, because there's so many different factors and variables that play into it.
Not a controlled environment.
Along that line, what Jason was saying, he goes in and it talks to him every time. Someone, the other group goes in, they don't talk to him. They might approach it in a negative way, and they can feel that. They might not like how they ask the questions. They might not be polite. They might be aggressive and offend them, and they just won't want to talk to them.
So kind of
There's
like
a lot of variations.
So kind of like a married couple.
Yeah, more or less. So it just how someone approaches it, he's going to ask a question one way. I might ask it a different way and be rude about it. They don't want to talk to me. I'm rude. They like him because he's nice, he's friendly, so they'll talk to him.
He's not nice or friendly.
Our group would always go in and we would, at the end of an investigation, we would go in, we'd split the group up, male, female, and we would do a blitz, is what we would call it. And the males would go in and do throughout the building, just EVP session.
Like a moving EVP session.
And ask questions throughout the building to see if they would get hits, and then they would come out and the females would go in and do the same thing, ask the same questions, and then at the end we would go through and listen to our recorders to see who got the answers, to see if they responded to the males or the females and who won that blitz session. And we would do it everywhere we went to see if they responded more to the males or the females.
And which one did they?
Mostly the female.
Maybe the guys were rude. Okay,
Can I?
Go ahead.
I've got a good question for you guys down there. So, for instance, you were talking about where we've all gone into a particular place and we're all getting the same thing, and then you bring in another group and they're not getting it. I've found some interesting times where that has happened, and then we bring in, let's say, a medium that we trust and believe in, and we've had it to where a couple mediums have gone in at separate times, different hours, but the mediums come out saying the same exact thing. So what's your thoughts on that? Because I've always been skeptical on the whole medium stuff, but as the years of doing this, I've been in some situations that there's no way I would have known that, from anybody else other than their own experience. So with that being said, multiple groups coming in, having the same experience, you maybe bring 3 or 4 people off the street, they're not getting that experience, but then you have a couple mediums that come in, they don't even know each other. They both didn't know they were coming in separate times, but came out and said the same stuff that we've witnessed.
I would love to answer that question. So I am a medium, and the thing is when you bring mediums into a room, we can evaluate energy. And so it's almost like there's a blueprint that has been laid in a place. And so we can look at the energy, and no matter whether you bring in 2 mediums or 20, there's a lot of great studies on mediumship and how you can kind of evaluate the data that is there. And so when we come in, we're looking at energy, we're looking at information in that aspect. And so no matter what regard it might be, the reason why it's so stable is because we all sense the same thing. We feel the same spirits, we sense the same echoes or footprints. And so we're able to really establish that the data is clear because everybody gets the same information because of the fact that we're all seeing and feeling and sensing the same thing.
I got a follow-up question to that, though. And it's one of my questions that I've always had. When it comes down to mediums, are they actually reading the spirit energy there, or are they reading my knowledge of what's going on?
Mediums are not mind readers, Adrian. I'm sorry to report. I wish I could. I'd be making a lot more money in this field if I could. So we just read the energy. What's that? Yeah, nothing new with that. So, but yeah, no, we read the energy of the space or the spirit, and everything and everyone is made up of energy. So if I was doing a reading for you, for example, I would pull your energy, your roadmap per se, but I can't tell you what you had for dinner last night, or I can't tell you if you're thinking of blue or red or a number between 1 and 20. I can't do that because that's not mediumship, or that's not being psychic. That's just kind of guesswork. I'm not a magician. So.
I think one thing to keep in mind when you're talking about going into a location is you got to remember that you're dealing with people. All these spirits, they used to be people. So the energy in which anybody comes into even your house now is going to have a huge impact on what kind of interaction you're going to give that person. So if somebody comes into your house with a bad energy, you're not going to want to deal with them. And it's not, I don't think it's any different on the spirit side. If somebody comes into a haunted location with an off energy, the spirits are either going to jive with that energy or they're not.
Well, a really good example of that is, in a human standpoint, is in feeling energy. Is, have you ever gone to the grocery store and you're like, you feel fine before, and you go and you're like, ugh, it just feels so heavy and not great? Or have you ever gone to see, something that you're like, oh, this should be a great experience, and you're like, I come away feeling exhausted and worn down, kind of like when you go to work. You're working, you can be sitting at your desk all day, but you just feel tired. That's kind of how we perceive spirits and their energy read to us. So, a comparison.
Yeah, I think the question about the scientific approach is kind of where we started this part of the conversation. I agree with everybody, but I think the closest that we can come to a scientific approach is investigating with multiple pieces of equipment that corroborate each other. That's the closest that we can come to.
And if one of us ever pass, we say, contact us, and then we corroborate from both sides.
I always tell my team members that they die, speak directly into the mic.
Yeah,
So-
I tell them not to call me.
So my mom passed away a few years ago. I have no concept of time. It's probably 4 years ago now, but she had always said if she died, she would support me in it. She would help me try to figure it out. And I did try to reach out to her. I don't know what the time frame is though when somebody passes away and when they actually figure out how to talk. So that's like, there's so many things we have to figure out first before we even figure out if they exist, because there's just so many variables.
There's definitely a process. We call it processing, where we go through and we kind of look at things. That's a whole different conversation. But the biggest answer that I've been told, because I've asked that question, I've lost a lot of family members, and the biggest answer I get is, well, I mean, I know I'll come and see you sometimes, but I have so much more fun stuff to do. I love you, but I got things to do. So that's sometimes the hard truth of it.
Well, I got a kind of question following up on that. You talk about your mom recently passing. Every time we deal with ghosts or hear ghost stories, it's always, they were wearing period dress, whatever that means. Yeah, old clothes, old style. It's always a Revolutionary War soldier or a Confederate war soldier. It's not like somebody from the 70s. I've not seen a zoot suit yet or anything like that. Nobody in bell bottom. So what's your thought process on that?
Well, actually, we have had situations where we've had apparitions on investigations that appeared to be more recent, particularly one in Fort Scott, Kansas, of a young man in a 1980s windbreaker suit. And I think that you do have a lot of variables going on, and I think it's kind of like saying everyone should be able to play basketball like Michael Jordan. So everyone should be able to manifest as an apparition at the same time after their death, etc. And then I don't know that it works that way. But in this particular situation, we were doing an investigation at a historical home, and we took a break. And three of us were standing on the front porch. A car pulls up at the end of the block, guy gets out, walks across the street. Then someone gets out of the passenger side wearing a windbreaker suit and walks up, stops in front of the house, looks up at us and says, "Does Mr. Lent still live here?" And one of the other investigators said, "No, he's passed away, but his daughter does," and he nods. And then he walked on down the sidewalk, maybe 40 feet, and he disappeared. As it turned out, the owner starts pulling out yearbooks, and it looked like a boy that died in her high school class. And she said he lived 2 doors down and had always mowed their grass. So for whatever reason, he was able to manifest in a shorter time than, the Victorian lady or whatever. I think it has to do with circumstances and individuality more than anything.
Yeah, to add to that, so when we do like public events and tours and stuff, I like to talk about confirmation bias. As people who do investigations and paranormal research, we know that not every apparition is from the 1860s. But I think a lot of people who are just going about their day-to-day life, when they think they see a ghost, the first thing that comes to mind is, the woman in the old flowing Victorian dress. Or, they may not be certain on what they saw. So they're going to default to a more pop culture view of what a ghost should be. So, I mean,
Or they assume what they saw was a living person.
True. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, we've been all over the place investigating, and we keep running into all kinds of different time periods and stuff. We're investigating an old salon that used to be the offices of the beginnings of Beach and Stearman and all of them. Well, in the salon, we had KSN News wanted to do a story for the Halloween time. So we were inside and we were investigating all night, a few things happening. One of the best pieces of evidence we ever got from that night was just an audio recording. You can hear us in the background setting up and stuff, but when we went back to listen, it's right along the strip of Delano in Wichita, so it's like back in the day, it was the big party town, and where there was brothels, saloons, and everything. But what we caught wasn't from that time period. It was listening back. It was probably late 90s. 2 very happy drunk guys singing about the year 2000, and meant nothing to me. But Jake was like, "I've heard that before," and they were singing an old Conan O'Brien tune and it's loud and clear, but we didn't hear it at the time. But going back and hearing it, and
They sing it exactly how they did on
right, and it wasn't something from outside because it's pretty solid inside that building. You don't even hear the cars driving by or anybody.
That's a great
But
story. I like
it was
that.
great to hear like these 2 very happy guys singing along together. It was great.
I think that a really good answer to the question is that the reason why we see a lot more like Civil War soldiers or things like that is because they passed away in battle. They are trauma bound to each other, so therefore they can feed off of each other's energy. And so we're able to sense them a lot more. When an individual passes, it's a lot harder because they have to radiate their own energy and find their own energy source.
Well, that leads on to my next question. Is that does there have to be a traumatic event in order for a place to be haunted?
No.
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 Simple, no.
No, not necessarily. I think that in regards to the strength of the trauma or the event, it can feel a lot more symptomatic. But you don't have to have a traumatic event. You can have a peaceful passing, and you're at somebody's home, and you're like, oh, I feel their presence, and they could feel frustrated or annoyed because they passed away too young, or they, we all have reasons why we feel the way we do, but it does not have to necessarily be that case. And there can be really strong individuals. Anger is a really, really good emotion that drives a lot of spirits, because if you're angry, you can fuel up faster. Same thing with, sadness or loss. And so energy works on the kind of fuel of emotions. And so that's how spirits can take things out of electronics, or us specifically as people. They can feed off of that to kind of give results.
I honestly don't think it has anything to do with that one way or the other. We've seen areas that have a lot of paranormal activity, and as far as we can see through documentation, there was nothing that happened one way or the other. And that leads us back to the origin of what is actually causing the haunting. So there's, of course, the theory of being dead people, or there's also where it swings into what we call the Fae, or the other, where we don't actually know what the origin of this is. And when you look in folklore, there's a lot of stuff that goes on with ghosts and with angels, demons, all that stuff, and the Fae, where it's all tied together. And it kind of gets muddy water.
Somebody does all the time. It's all, I don't know what that thing, what that all means. So do you believe that ghost is tied to a certain location? Why or why not?
Depends on the type of haunting. If we're looking at a residual haunting, then it's tied to the energy of that area and what caused that to happen. There could be spirits or anomalies that are tied to certain objects, certain people. It depends. We don't really know. We're still collecting evidence on that, and what we call evidence anyway.
And some spirits don't even know that they're gone or what's going on with their life, because we were doing an investigation with the public in Ness City. It's a 4-story bank, and Jake here you were in the basement? He was in the basement with the SLS camera, audio recording, spirit box going, and he turns to see there's these 2 figures sitting in chairs. And as through the spirit box, all he hears is Spanish. Well, the girl that was in his group actually happened to speak Spanish. She started giggling. He's like, can you translate that? She's like, yeah. They're asking, why are you here haunting our home? Because they thought we were haunting them. And so we had to, she translated to them like, no, this is such and such year, and you're inside of a bank. And it took a little bit, but finally they were like, well, welcome to our home.
Well, in essence, you were haunting them.
Yeah.
Got a question here.
Well, I want to go back. I'm an Old West historian, and mostly, all over the state of Kansas, but Ellsworth, Kansas is kind of focused. Ellsworth was the end of the trail, wild, crazy town, people got killed all over. And yet, there are no ghost stories. So that strip of a couple of streets along the railroad tracks that were full of sleep, are there spirits just wandering around that we're not aware of? How do you explain that there's nothing that anyone ever reports?
Not everyone is sensitive enough to sense or feel them or see them, but they're there. Like I said, where I went to, they're just in another realm or another dimension that we can't see. Go back to Carl Sagan talking about dimensions and how to understand them. He had the example of a piece of two-dimensional is forward and back, side to side. And so an apple falls from a tree and shows up, and the two-dimensional being asks the three-dimensional, where'd you come from? Well, I came from up there. what's up. They don't understand the concept, and the third dimensional person didn't know how to explain to the second dimensional where they came from or how to get there. And I see it as the same thing in the spirit. They're in another dimension. Sometimes it bleeds over either way, but they can't tell us how to get there or how to detect it. That's why you have different types of equipment to try and detect different forms of that dimension, but we've never really narrowed down exactly what works the best to see that at all times.
So what about this? We've ran into this twice where we found two spirits occupying the same space, looking for each other. And they're in the same space, and we can talk to both of them, but they can't seem to find each other. In that space. Right. What do you?
Time and space.
Or different points in time that they aren't, somehow both of those points in time are touching yours, but not each other's.
Right.
I got a.
1940, another one might be from 1940.
No, in one of them, it was mother and daughter. They would have been in the same time period.
So I want to ask you a follow-up to all that. You're talking about time periods and ghosts inhabiting the same area. Do you think that the ghosts are aware sometimes? Do you think ghosts can communicate?
Yes.
Definitely. I think so. I think they can communicate. There's a lot of variables that we just simply have no idea about. You know, you very well may have a situation where, you know, there's two like entities in the same place looking for each other, but they can't find each other. But I think they very much can communicate. Depending on where you're at, you can see some evidence of that if you really dig deep and are very thorough with gathering evidence. Here's something to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, we've had those situations where we've had multiple presences or entities there and not seeming to be aware of each other, or that they think that we are the ghosts. In fact, one where we had a presence call us, we were visions. You know, why were they seeing visions? And so a lot of those things are complicated and we don't understand all those variables. I'm going to throw a monkey wrench in it and say that we personally, we discount a lot of the equipment that's used unless you have a lot of different equipment verifying or indicating the same thing.
Corroboration.
Right, because there is no ghost hunting equipment. Everything that is out there was created for another application, and it looks good on TV. Shiny bauble effect. It's like the crow. And so a lot of them have some utility. Some of them have no utility. And unless you understand how they work, particularly as you're watching on TV, you really don't have a sense of what's being presented to you.
The reason why I asked that question is we got a great EVP. Is that what you're getting ready to talk about?
Yeah, I
Go
was
ahead.
going to say we do have the EVP of the child answering an obvious question that was asked by another spirit, that he's called Charlie. Obviously, somebody asked what one of our investigators' name was, and we got the child's voice answering that question. We didn't get the question, but the child said he's called Charlie, obviously answering the question that was asked about one of our investigators. So they do communicate. We got the answer to it. We just didn't get the question.
Spirits definitely can communicate. There are conscious spirits that are aware that they're here, and then there are those that are echoes, or those that are not aware, but the ones that are conscious about it have the ability to. But it's almost like trying to communicate through Jello. Or like a solid wall. You know that you can send something through, and so it's easier to just knock on it and kind of like let them know that you're here versus trying to communicate, because not only does it take a lot of energy, it also it takes a lot of finagling and it takes a lot of, wherewithal to kind of get that information. If you're recording or if you're doing something like that, it's definitely feasible, but it's a lot more complicated in the doing of the thing.
Got a question out here.
I actually have two questions. Can they not move on? Or do they need help moving on? Is that why they don't move on?
Sometimes they do need help, yes.
So predominantly,
But,
go ahead, I'm sorry.
I'm not a very scientific person. So my whole experience into this was a near-death experience, dying, floating above my body, seeing everybody and everything at the same time. So I was thrown into this spirit world. And now I work as a medium and I investigate locations and I do readings. And in my experience is that a lot of places I go, these spirits are there because they have a story they need to tell and they need somebody to listen and to validate them. And then they step on and move on into their journey, wherever it is they need to move on to. So they won't communicate with everybody. So I might not be the medium for them. She may be, So, and I don't believe, I'm going backwards, but I've been trying to jump in. I don't believe that spirits do stay in a room or a certain building or haunt a certain place, because they come visit me. So they know I'm coming and they're there, So I don't believe that. Go ahead.
I agree with you on that, absolutely. So the reason why spirits tend to stick around are for a few reasons. Predominantly, most spirits do pass and they come back and visit, but the coined word is unfinished business. And so sometimes if there's somebody that's in our world that is sick or is preparing to pass away, or somebody who is needing some support, or perhaps they have some guilt because they weren't the nicest to that person, they have this feeling of, I need to come back and support you. And so every soul has the opportunity to pass, is what I've been told, but sometimes they want to stay because of usually a deep emotion, or because they're waiting for their spouse to pass away so they can go together, or their child, or there's a myriad of different reasons, but predominantly it is very, very personal to them.
She got a follow-up question too.
What do you guys think about spirits attaching to you?
Took one of my questions. Shame on you.
It's not super common. There is special occasions, but they don't want your energy. They don't want to deal with it. Again, it takes a lot for an attachment to form, and there has to be a reason. If it is a human spirit, if it's something more negative, it still takes a lot for it to happen. And there's been tons and tons of cases, and in actuality, it's a lot of other things that aren't actually the case. It does happen. I've dealt with a couple of cases myself, but it's very rare.
So we were doing an investigation for the public, and this was just about 3 months after my wife had passed away. And right before she passed away, this guy actually saying his last goodbyes to her and everything, asked her, if you could do one thing, could you please try something and do something when you pass to make sure that Jason and I are not doing all this for nothing? And she just smiled and said, I'll do my best. 3 months later, I'm at this event, and I was using a kind of like I don't know, it's kind of like an EVP session that you ask the question, hit record, stay silent, play it back, you keep it, it's good, you keep it, move on. Well, I asked a question. We were hearing the sounds of a little boy inside the room. It sounded like he was playing with marbles, rolling them around and stuff like that. I could hear him giggling. But I had asked the question, where are you? Where are you at in this room? And I went to go hit record. And as soon as I hit record, the guest, who I had told many times to shut their mouth when I hit record, she's like, asked the question right away, like, can you give us your name? I'm like, oh, dear God. So I hit playback, and I had asked that question, where are you at? You know, can you pinpoint where you're at in this room? You hear the guest ask that question, but right after that, there's a voice that says, why didn't you try looking under the chair? And I immediately knew who it was. It was my wife's voice, and I played it for everybody in my family. These guys, they're like, oh, that's her. But it was her tone that made me laugh, because it was that kind of, hey, stupid, why don't you try looking under the chair? But right after she spoke, you hear a little voice that says, I'm here. So it was like they're right there. And she's popped in many times in investigations, especially when we're doing the Estes session. And I've had, you know, other people in the rooms, family members, you know, pop in when we're doing large events. And we get tears. It's happy moments for everybody, usually, until Jake has, like, bad moments with it.
I think we get questions all the time about attachments. And I think it comes from the ghost shows. Certain ones tend to promote that idea. And then, but honestly, this goes back to The Exorcist. As in our culture in America, we were not worried about Ouija boards. We were not worried about possessions and exorcisms and things like that until The Exorcist happened. That movie changed the public pop consciousness, and suddenly those things were in the forefront. Before that, a Ouija board was a Friday night game you played with the neighbors, and no one thought twice about it. And so, again, pop culture is forming our views on, oh my gosh, do I have to worry about an attachment and that kind of thing. And again, I'm not saying that it's not possible, but I think it's very unlikely, and I think it has much more to do with the person. Are you in a bad mental state, or ill, or opening yourself up to something negative? I think it has a lot more to do with that. After 20 years, there's been a couple of times after investigations that, you know, I come home and for a couple of days, there might be something different in the house than was there before, and they wander off. I think I agree. They tend to stay around what is important to them or what resonates with them. You know, oh, I love this building. It's pretty. Or this was my home. And I think those are the biggest things. I don't think people need to worry near as much as they do. We get this question all the time, and it's kind of sad, actually.
So for the mediums on the panel, do you guys believe that spirits like family members, friends, are following or attached to you or other people and stuff like that? Because I know a friend who's a medium who, you know, will tell people, you know, well, you've got like 5 spirits that are attached to you that follow you. So what's your take on that?
Some people, which I go along this a lot of times, is people say they have a guardian angel. A lot of times I think it's a former or a past family member looking in or checking on you, making sure you're okay. They're not there all the time, but
right.
You know, they show up. They just want to check on you, see how everyone's doing, and then go on to do something else.
So not quite an attachment, just popping in and out.
Let me say this, ma'am. You asked a very objective question about them being attached. I think it's a very sensible question. I think the problem is that we all have very subjective answers. We don't have any one clear delineating answer for you. We all experience different things. Is it possible? Of course it's possible, because we don't clearly understand exactly what kind of spirit we're dealing with. If it's human, if it's inhuman, what the origins of it are. Is it possible that something can attach itself to somebody? Of course, because we don't understand the science behind it. We still have to gather information too. So, good question. We don't have a very good answer.
My thoughts on your question are, yes, they do come and they do visit. They don't stay and they don't kind of, because human life to them is confining. They've been there, they've done that, they've got things to do. So if, say, you're going to go see a medium, yeah, they'll come around because they know that they can get through to you and they can give you messages, but they're not going to be there while you're, doing your laundry or paying your bills, because that's not enjoyable to them. We do have spirit guides who are helping us on our path. Most people believe that, and again, he said guardian angels, that's also true. But our family and friends and loved ones and pets especially do love to come and visit us, because we can sense in some sort of periphery that they are there. It may not be a direct sense, but yes, absolutely, they do come and visit often. And some people don't quite get along with other people. Like, say, if mom and dad weren't quite the best of friends close to the end of times, they won't come together, but maybe dad comes in the morning and mom comes at night. So yes, they do come, and usually they come in groups of 3 to 5.
Okay, I got another question out here.
Yeah, I've heard of different kinds of spirits like poltergeist, orbs, and apparitions. Are those different kinds of spirits, or are they just spirits acting differently?
So spirits are people who have passed away predominantly. Poltergeist, that's more of and you guys can let me know your opinions, but more like a psychological situation with energy, demonic or whatnot. Those are different energies, but in regards to the main, like the big meat and potatoes of the spirit world, it's people.
Well, a poltergeist, the definition of poltergeist is from the German, noisy ghost. And it applies to hauntings where you have things move, things that are a little more, I guess, physical, violent. Some people do attribute it to inhuman entities, but it can be just a human entity too. I find that, especially in some places where you had violence, or you had someone that was just a real jerk, and jerk to the point they hurt other people, and they're haunting. Jerk in life is usually a jerk in the afterlife. Or a prankster. Yeah, or a prankster.
I want to ask a meaning question over here. What about like animals? You said spirits are predominantly like people, but talk about animals a little bit.
Sure, absolutely. So animals they definitely do come and visit us. And animals, when they cross over, they go into their side of things on the other side, or in the spirit realm. But they do come and visit too. And especially around certain times, like their birthdays or your birthday, or when you're having a rough day, they love to come around. You might feel a little hopping, feeling a little patting around in your bed. That's your favorite animal coming to visit. They absolutely do. They're very present with us, and they're still our loved ones. So they come and visit. I would say honestly that animals tend to come and visit a bit more than people do, because they have this urge to comfort and to give connection. Whereas people, they're just like, hey, I'm here. Animals, their job in life, in their belief, is to comfort and to love.
Example of that, I have a house that's not that old, built in '64. I have seen the original owner in a bouffant hairdo, white dress just past her knees with about 2-inch round red polka dots on it. Middle of the day, full body apparition, watching me fold laundry, and she's standing in the kitchen. Yeah,
exactly.
The couple who had been married over 50 years, who had passed away, I bought the house from their kids, found out from a neighbor that they had cat. And I thought, okay, well, I'd see shadow figures, because I remodeled the house the whole 14 years I've owned it. And every time I'm remodeling, it kicks up activity because I'm tearing out a wall or messing up their house as they see it, because like, what's this guy coming in doing this to our house? and I'll get activity, but only usually shadow figures. Well, sometimes out of the corner of my eye, I would see something low to the ground and didn't think about. 2 years later, I found out they had a cat. I replaced a sliding glass door, single pane window. And once I replaced it with a double pane window, French doors to the patio, when the cat will walk by, I can see its reflection. It's a tuxedo cat. I've had guests say, hey, I saw your cat. It's kind of skittish. I said, I don't have a cat. I don't have any pets. Well, I saw it run down the hall or whatever. I said, what did it look like? Well, it was a black and white tuxedo cat. So the people are still there. The last couple that owned, I said they'd been married over 50 years. They both passed away peacefully in the house. And their cat's still there. And they're always active. So it's nothing wrong happened there. They were comfortable there. It was their last house.
Okay, I'm gonna, since you stole my question earlier, I'm gonna ask a follow-up question to that. Anyhow, has anything ever followed you home?
Yes. So I used to be a docent at the Brown Mansion in Coffeyville, and I was doing tours, and it was a lot of fun. And one day, the butler at the Brown Mansion, I don't know if y'all have ever been there, but it's pretty interesting. His name was Charlie, and I just jokingly, I'm like, okay, Charlie, I'm going home. I said, I wish you could come and clean my house, jokingly. And the room that he would live in was in the basement area. And so it felt kind of dark and dank. And so I got home and everything was fine for me. I was cooking dinner and I just smelled a waft of basement. And I'm just like, Charlie, you can go now. I didn't mean it, so I've had a couple things follow me home, but usually it's out of curiosity more so than ill intent. And if it does feel funky, then I do cleanse, and that's really important for my work. Is I like to make sure that I cleanse. So.
With like dial? No. Anyhow, that's it. Only one person.
No, we've had some things.
Okay, I was saying, because my wife's got a great story about one of our investigators in the back of the car, but she hadn't leaned forward to that. But you first. He's a microphone hog. Yeah, that's all right. Go ahead.
We definitely have an uptick in activity after certain locations when we come home from investigations. So just recently we had been to a location that we consider one of the more negative ones or dark ones that we go to. And the next morning I got up and I went into the bathroom and I just kind of closed the door and something fell, and it was a little moccasin that we just had around the house. But in order to fall like that, it had to have been placed on top of the door. I mean, immediately you call, I was texting my husband, like, why'd you put the moccasin on top of the door? It's like, I don't even know what you're talking about. But just little things like that that happen. And I don't consider that an attachment. It's just like Leah said, sometimes you're visited before you go to a location, maybe even before you know you're going to a location, there's things that come in and say hello and kind of prepare you for that.
And he steals the mic away from her.
She said, go ahead. So back when I used to do homes, I used to investigate for people. I always make my wife mad because I'd be like, they don't want you here, come home with me. And I do it almost every time. And it's, there's only been one time where we had investigated.
Don't interject. Don't ever do that.
Huh? Oh, I do it all the time. So we investigated the community center there in Bartlesville, and we came home, and I don't know if it was that night or the next night, but like activity was like going. We had a white shadow just like go past us all the way down the hallway. It was crazy, but honestly, I found it more, because I'm not a big on blessings and stuff like that or cleansings or anything. But
when you tell them, I'll just take it home with me, and you start telling the ghost, you can come home with me. The client usually felt better about it. Somebody's willing to take this. And generally it was never anything that was doing harm to them. It was just scaring them. And I want to be scared because what's the best way to investigate something if you have it in your own home? So that's it.
Well, we always had stuff following us home. So it was normal, but our house was already haunted, so it would follow us home, and then ours would kick it out. So it wouldn't last too long. I don't know what story my husband wanted me to tell
Coming
you.
back from the hospital, Jennifer.
Oh, the old man that was in the back seat. We had a hospital that we would go to all the time, a tuberculosis sanatorium, and one of our members, she swerves and pulls over and jumps out of her car, and she goes, "There's an old man in my back seat." So we had to get the sage out right there and clean out the back of her car. She said, "I'm driving alone. I look up in the rearview mirror and there's an old man looking back at me." And I said, from then on, we told everybody when we were leaving the hospital, "Okay, y'all stay here. We'll be back in a couple of months. Y'all stay here," and nobody follow us home. But yeah, it freaked her out that there was somebody looking at her when she looked up in her rearview mirror. So yeah, we just kind of had to start telling people to stay here. We'll be back.
It's pretty funny too, because you got to know Jennifer, because she talks like she's always on fast forward. And when she got scared, she was way fast forward. Okay. So we talked about cleansing for a second. What do you mean by that?
So there are many different ways to cleanse. My personal favorite is a nice salt bath with a little bit of, any kind of salt you want to use, but predominantly, the big bag kind that is the magnesium sulfate. You can use sage. Palo Santo is my personal favorite because it smells good and it helps my allergies. You can create a room spray with salt and boiled water. You can do a lot of different things, hold crystals in your pockets. Cleansing is a very personal kind of way of doing things. So you can do it however you like, but just to kind of clear your energy, and even doing something called grounding where you just kind of try to balance your energy. That's a little bit too expressive, but I mean, my favorite is salt baths. I'll go with that one.
That's it? Okay, no problem. Okay, we'll go on to this. All right, of all these locations that we do investigations of, you guys got to have a favorite location. Do you prefer hospitals? Do you prefer educational buildings?
I like doing museums and graveyards if we get permission. There's one outside of Tulsa in the Leonard area, Gibson Cemetery. Very small cemetery, less than an acre in size, mostly Indian. And we have permission from the owners to go there anytime we go there to train new investigators, because the closest electrical lines going down the road is about a quarter mile away. So we get true readings on especially EMF detectors. There's one, English lady. We have one gravestone there, English lady. She'll talk to Christy. We've never got anything on the recordings, and Elizabeth. But we can set the K2 meter or Gauss meter, that the ones that light up with energy, increases, it lights up for magnetic fields. Set it on her headstone, and ask her questions, and she will reply on that. But we've never got any kind of voice recordings anywhere in that cemetery. But she will respond every time we go to talk to her.
So, I mean, my favorite place to investigate, I'm not going to say like, a hospital or educational facility, but we have the Kendrick House back home in Carthage, Missouri, which was built pre-Civil War, used as a field hospital during the Battle of Carthage, and it is probably one of the coolest places that we've ever done any work at. It's consistent. You get a lot of responses, more than just EVPs. We've got stuff on camera.
Yeah, we've been there thousands of hours at this.
Yeah, we've been there, what, 15 years?
15 years and thousands of hours. And the nice thing about that is that's the kind of the closest you can get kind of to the scientific method, is because we're there so much that we see patterns. There's 12 voices on voice waves that we can recognize that are there repeatedly. And it's nice because we get to see those patterns. And one interesting thing, it was an occupied house for 130 years. And what we find is that if you investigate and you're there during the early part of that time period, you're getting responses from the 1850s, 1860s. Over the next few months, the activity and the voices you get tend to be from later in time. And then after so long, it kind of loops back around and it starts back over.
And the best part is it's kind of spooky.
I like spookies. We all like spookies right over here.
We prefer residential cases. Those are my favorite. I like to help people. I like the mystery behind it. I like to look up all the history and just kind of give them answers that they need, whether it's paranormal or not, and it turns into an investigation. Always the goal is to never, step foot in their house and help them solve their problem. But I think that my favorite is residential places to investigate.
I agree as well. I like to be able to give families any kind of ending or closure or healing, especially with like loss of children or pets or loved ones. If they think that their family's in their home, we'll go in there and we'll talk to them. And if they usually are, and they usually have a reason for that. And there was a really, I usually cry a lot during these investigations because I love to help people. And I work with a lot of parents that have lost children. And there's a little boy that this family reached out to me about 5 years ago, and he was fighting with cancer. He didn't have any treatment that was going to be viable for him. They told him, you can, we'll keep him comfortable. You can take him home and he won't, he won't suffer. And so they took him home, and he passed about 3 months after the fact. And the mother was a very religious woman, and she would go into her son's room and things would be moved around. And she was afraid that it was some sort of dark entity or dark spirit. She felt like her son's spirit had left and crossed over. And when I went in there, and she would say things would move around and things. And so, especially the stuffed animals. And so when I went in there with her, the teddy bear fell off at her feet. And I said, oh, he wants you to know that he wants you to hug the teddy bear and think of him. And so I had to convince her that, yes, this is what's going on. This is the situation. This is how he feels. This is what he was doing, before he passed. And so being able to give families closure is my biggest honor, whether it's, a loved one or a cherished pet or, great grandpa wanting to know, I've had families reach out. They're like, hey, where's the money that great grandpa had buried in the garden? I'm like, Paul used that to buy something fun, or he went to the casino. You know what I mean? So, but I do enjoy the residential for sure.
All right, the boss lady's here, so let's wrap it up pretty quick.
All right. I like to think of Holmberg Hall on OU's Norman campus as an accidental investigation site. It's the big auditorium on campus, and Professor Mildred Andrews still shows up and attends a lot of student performances. So you can look out into the balcony and see this outline of a matronly old lady with a bulbous hairdo. And I've talked to, 50, 60 people who claim to have seen her, and people who started high-fiving, and lots of people who just started crying because they didn't want to see a ghost. But there you go.
All right, everybody, thank you so much, and I'm going to give it back to her. Chicken mean mugging me.
Thank you. Hello. Hello. Okay, thank you to Adrian for being our guest moderator. Applause! Is it going? There we go. Thank you to all of our panelists. This is our biggest panel by far today. As you can see, we had to pack them inside like sardines, but great, great fun. So you guys are free to go and take your break. Before I let the audience go really quick. So the donut shop